um, DRI VOP session. Want to take time to introduce Jacob Golden. So Jacob Golden and I go a little ways back. We were serving together in the military in the Army. He was a sergeant, second sergeant, and had a very successful transition getting out of the military, landing into the banking sector, doing BC and DR. So he's going to give you a little bit of a kind of a chat on his transition story, as well as tell you a bit about the BCDR from the banking sector. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to you, Jacob, and you take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey guys, thanks for joining. Hey, let me see if I can pull up the chat room real quick. Just a second. There we go. Um, hey, so where's everybody kind of out of? I'm sure we've got a lot of people all around the U.S. Atlanta, Oceanside, California, Sarasota, Florida. I wish I was in Sarasota right now. Hey, so I'm actually out of Augusta. We'll see where I end up. We're in the middle of a merger and acquisition. We just got bought out by a much larger bank, so that's interesting. But hey, so yeah, I'm Jacob Golden. I was in the military for 8 years. I was with Dan Luigi there for a few of them, doing some SIGINT stuff, and a lot of that work that I did over there kind of related into BCDR, and that's kind of where I leveraged a lot of my you know knowledge as far as relating anything from CBCP skill sets over into getting a job and being successful with that. And so I have been in the banking industry now for 2 years. I joined on as a business continuity planner too. And basically, so when you join a small bank or a small firm, or I would even go as far to say as a small company, uh, whenever you get hired on, something that another thing that you can relate with the military is you kind of just become a jack of all trades guy. And so I joined on with Cadence in February of 24. It is 26. So, yeah. Um, and as far as getting out and doing that transition, I basically really just kind of dove straight headfirst into learning my resume and developing it. And I mean, I tell you, I probably spent 24 to I probably spent 30 hours on that resume, really just developing it and asking people to take a look at it and figuring out what I can really, have on there and learn and be able to talk about. Because something with a resume, you really need to learn how to talk about every single thing that you have on there because people are probably going to ask you questions on it on the interview. Um, and so I got my CBCP in December of 23. Thank you, Dan Luigi. He kind of pointed me in that direction. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be where I am today. So definite thanks to him for that. Um, but so I started. I I had about 3 months left in the military, and I just dove straight headfirst into you know how can I get a job? What do I need to do to be successful? And I think something that a lot of people, a lot of vets and active duty guys or, military in general kind of get stuck on is, number one, talking positively about yourself. That was very hard for me to do. Um, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate because in the military, like it's not something that we were really taught to do. Um, and being able to sell yourself quickly and not, be over the top and get your point across pretty quickly. The second thing I would add on to that, would be just be, you know, just be yourself. Because the last thing you want to do is be someone who you're not, and then in 3 months the company doesn't like who you are, and something bad happens or you get moved around or whatever. Um, and kind of try to try to be a lot of the interviews that I was doing. So we hardly even spoke a lot about technical things. We hardly spoke about RTOs or RPOs or your BIAs or your business continuity plans or an ITDR plan or disaster recovery testing. It was more so, hey, are you able to do this? Yeah, I'm able to do it. And then we just kind of talked about life for 20 minutes, and that was about it. Um, and that has been a lot of my interviews. I will say for ITDR interviews, they're a little bit more technical, but beyond that. Anyways, so and again, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat. Unless you want to save them for the end, you can do that too. And I'll try to answer them as we go. Um, but anyway, so I spent 3 weeks straight doing interviews and applying and networking, connecting with people, trying to meet with people that we had conversations with in the CBCP class that came and did, the guest speakers and whatnot. Um, you know, I was applying to jobs for 8 hours a day. And how many of you guys all you guys have your CBCP?
Yeah, everyone should have CBCP in here.
Okay. Okay, great. And so that's something else I want to harp on is just having a CBCP isn't going to get you a job. You really got to kind of learn the trade craft a little bit, and some of that is, it's extra development after getting your CBCP. And if you've never been in the job field before with business continuity or something, just kind of going on the internet, learning, watching. It sounds goofy, but watching YouTube videos. And and also getting involved with other people and talking about what makes up a business continuity plan, or how can you fill that role successfully when you get that role. um there's a lot of people try to make applying to jobs just seem so easy, and I'm gonna I'll figure it out, you know what I mean? But there's a lot that goes into it, and spending time doing interviews is what really allowed me to feel comfortable and end up being successful as well. um, but again, just having a CBCP isn't, and I don't mean that you need a degree. I personally, get into that later, but um, it's more so learn the trade craft and be competent and be likable. So I got into Cadence Bank, and where I started with Cadence Bank was, again, business continuity planner two. Shortly over the next 2 months, and with that, I was doing business continuity plans. Doing interviews with different lines of business within the bank to develop your BIAs, your business impact analysis. Getting down all the information, and the tool that we were using is Fusion. If any of you guys are familiar with it, it's a business continuity tool. Great tool. Um, and so after a couple of months, I shortly got moved over into IT disaster recovery because the bank didn't really have anybody to do IT disaster recovery. Um, and what that entailed for me was, you know, basically quarterbacking disaster recovery testing and exercises. So, production failovers for certain applications. And this is kind of where the technical side of your CBCP gets involved. And
Hey,
maybe if
Jacob,
you're interested in doing that, you can get an ITIL.
hey, you didn't have any experience in DR, right?
I didn't. Nope.
So how did you how do you make that transition? Like, what do you relate from the military to get into DR?
So I was a DNEA at the agency. And so a lot of that network exploitation stuff, and then kind of reacting to some of the incidents, and we would set up similar things, and this is all unclassed things I can say. We would set up similar, environments like a disaster recovery test, and it basically was to an extent. Um, and so a lot of that, uh, you know, what I learned in the military was super, super helpful in my transition over. But there's also a lot that I learned. I basically told them, I said, hey, I will figure it out. I never gave a no. I can't do this. I don't know. I never gave an I don't know. It's, hey, I don't remember, or I'm not sure. Let me get back to you in an hour with it, or tomorrow. Um, you know, and I shortly became the enterprise lead of IT disaster recovery for the whole bank. Um, and I developed a lot of rapport and trust with a lot of people that I worked with, and I kept my mouth shut and learned. And that's a lot of, I would say that, I mean, going into any job, I would suggest doing that. But um, and I do work remote. I really actually enjoy business continuity. I enjoy disaster recovery more. But I just enjoy the trade craft of it all. I'm a big fan of my job. So um,
Looks like we have a question from Larry. Says, where did you get your BC tools?
we got our BC tools essentially. So had already had Fusion when we came on, and then OnSolve was another one. But so Fusion is basically a repository of all of our data. So all of our applications, all of the servers associated dependencies go there. All of our business continuity plans and disaster recovery plans are held in there. And so I think, those Fusion's a widely known tool, but they adopted that before we got on, or before I got onto the bank. And now we will have, individuals go out to DRI or DRJ, and they'll have, business continuity tools will have their reps out there to try to talk you into getting their product and whatnot. And that's also a methodology that, sometimes we have used that. And how often did you go back to the DRI resources to complete tasks related to your positions? Maybe in the beginning. Probably a few times I leveraged that. Since then, I was mostly trying to learn, where I was in my field. Um, yeah, that's actually a good question. I should have leveraged that a lot more, but um, yeah, I mean, it was where was I at as far as you know? So after they had, kind of tossed me into being the enterprise-wide lead for ITDR. Um, I got moved under infrastructure, and I kind of just, tore down all of uh, all of our entire DR program and built it back up from scratch for application based. But I'm not going to nerd out on that, so I'll save you guys from that. Um, hey Dan, you got any questions that you have for me?
Yeah, I think going back to where you were talking about learning the craft. Um, how did you go about finding people? What did you ask them? What was some interesting things that you found out doing that way?
Um, I leveraged a lot of my peers. I definitely called you, and I leveraged some of the guys that we had in the business continuity course. Um, I can't remember his name, but you know, I basically asked them, hey, how should I be, how should I be acting in this role? Um, what are things that I really need to know? And then with my peer, like my coworkers, I would just ask a lot of questions like, hey, what does this mean? Hey, what is this? Hey, how do we go about doing this properly? Hey, how do we talk to customers? And we weren't customer facing, but for business continuity plans, because the corporate environment is a lot different, than being in the military. You can't speak to them the way that you would to other people in the military, and a lot of you guys know that. Um, and so, it's very political, especially when jobs are at risk. It's very, very political. And, something that I learned from going into the corporate role was how to maintain, my composure basically, and not if somebody says something, smart remark at me, just kind of ignore it and not engage. And, if it really gets serious, you just raise it up with your boss and they handle it. It's a lot more political for sure. For sure.
And Jacob, you mentioned talking about fostering trust earlier on. Can you walk us through how you leverage some of your soft skills to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So something that I learned when I was in, is obviously, I was in the Army, so we have those Army values, right? Um, and so when I got moved over into infrastructure and I was still new at the bank, nobody trusts the new guy, right? And everybody questions the new guy. Um, and honestly, genuinely, I just kind of did what I was supposed to do, and kind of stayed quiet for a while and learned my job, and eventually I would meet with them often to set up disaster recovery exercises. And as long as you do a good job and you're competent, I mean, that's kind of how you gain trust with a lot of people. And that's what I learned with the military is competency and learning your craft, right? um, and I think that just kind of applies to everywhere. um, and so yeah, I mean, I gained the support of a lot of my upper management, and it came out to be a very positive experience. And if I didn't join the military, I might not have obviously learned a lot of those skills for sure. 30,
I think
60, 90.
like in DR, um, they don't want you to know the technical, like low level details. It's nice to have, but asking questions, understanding what the needs are, and then you're really just getting the right person in the right seat to do a job. So you're coordinating, you're managing, you're not actually doing.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So obviously, I don't know how to fail over servers to our other data center or hot cold site, whatever. But you're absolutely correct. It is managing. I mean, it's almost a lot of what I was doing was kind of glorified project management at times, because it's like, we meet every week with all of our stakeholders, get all of them on, and then, figure out where the direction of where we're wanting to go, and, our executables. And that's kind of what a lot of the work was, other than, entering data with, interviewees from the different lines of business or the app owners. There is some level of technical knowledge you do need to know for sure. So, and I'll go through that. So, know how applications work, whether they are, on-site applications at your data center, and I would say this applies probably at any job or company, right? Um, there's the on-site applications, local installs and stuff, and then on top of that you've got like your vendor applications. So with those vendors, you have to make sure that you're getting with them every year, and they will conduct a disaster recovery test that you'll hop in and kind of see from afar and just watch that happen. But and then I would say know a little bit about cloud networking, not a whole lot. And let's see what else. Kind of know how like servers work and dependencies, and know what upstream downstream is. Um, and how to mitigate risk and give suggestions to people for sure. Um,
Yeah, and
something that what's that?
I think that for me, that really helped me, coming from a non-IT background. I was forthcoming with that with my boss, but before going into the bank, I took an AWS cloud practitioner course, and passed for certification. So that allowed me to speak the language with my cloud ops engineers and team. But do you have a specific like resource or or tool to point people to in the right direction for that education piece. I mean, for me, it was AWS. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. Some people
Yeah.
may choose Azure. I just picked the big gorilla in the industry, which, most cloud ops is formed on.
Yeah. I wish I did. Unfortunately, I don't. Something that I learned with a lot of companies that all of them have their proprietary language for sure, and then on top of that, they have which obviously knowing just basic networking infrastructure is not, but um, I guess I did learn a decent amount of it with the agency when I was over there. No, I don't. I could figure one out and get it over to you if you want me to do that.
Okay, I just like using different areas that people can use as like a resource. Whether that be like Azure or AWS, really give people that 50,000-foot view, so
For
that they
sure.
at least understand what is a data center, what are availability zones, what are regions. Holistically understanding those components is really key.
I think
And to Jacob's point, you don't have to understand all the terminology about load balancers and all that. Let that be part of like the engineering team that does that. But really, from Jacob's perspective, we're only just running the logistics. We're getting the people and the processes in place, and we're documenting, how that turns out.
yeah, I think you're on the right track because like AWS, it's free. You can take that cloud practitioner. You don't even have to take the cert. Just take the training, and you're going to learn so much valuable knowledge about what is the DR field, so that when you actually get into the space, you're smart enough to know what things are and learn the rest of it. You only have to get a kind of basic understanding of it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, agreed.
yeah. Something else I would do is I met with the infrastructure and network team every week, and I kind of would meet with the head engineer and ask him, "Hey, show me the process of what you actually do. Like, talk to me and get involved, and show me everything that you actually do for failovers, or hey, show me all the dependencies from your side of things." And we were using what were we using? Can't remember now. Yeah, I mean, I honestly just spoke with a lot of people and asked them to show me stuff.
Lean IX.
No, it was Zerto. So for failovers, that's what I was trying to remember.
Yeah. So what did the first like week or two of being in your job feel like? What were some of the components there? I know. What was the onboarding process like for you? I know a lot of military when they're transitioning over, they have the fear of the unknown. For me, the best way I can explain it is treat it like a PCS. Just be nice to people, and like you mentioned, keep your mouth shut, and then ask a lot of questions. But what does that look like from your perspective?
So I would say, something that I definitely struggled with, and I know a lot of people that are getting out struggle with, is imposter syndrome, right? Um, and the only thing that I can say with that is, do your best and be successful and overcome. But as far as the first week goes, is pretty slow. I would say the first 6 weeks were really slow because you're the new guy. They still are trying to get you kind of involved in where the puzzles fit with you into the program. Um, after about 6 weeks, it started ramping up because I started asking to be involved in stuff. I would say, hey, involve me in this meeting. Hey, can you make sure you CC me on this email so I kind of know what's going on? And then the more you start learning about what's going on and the more you're involved, uh, you know, the more purpose you have, and the more purpose you feel that can help overcome that imposter syndrome as well. Um, but and I mean that's something I definitely struggled with for sure. But it was pretty slow.
Yeah, like that
Yeah,
imposter syndrome, you're never gonna kick it. Like it's
You're never going to.
if you're the top of the top, you're still gonna feel like you're not doing enough, but you're probably overcompensating and doing way better than you should. I think one of the things that I experienced was just listening to what the organization needed and then making something. So if I don't know how to make it, I'm going to figure it out, make it, and then bring that forward. But they're going to tell you what they want, and then you go and get it together and make it for them.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing too, is like everybody here. Let me fix my audio real quick.
Yeah, Anthony says that sounds like my onboarding to ask questions and ask to get involved in the projects just so you can learn. One of the things that translated well with my military background is our high ops cadence, right? We're used to getting more done with less. Everything's due yesterday. And so I was always like, what else do you have? Like what else can I be involved in? And showing up when it's uncomfortable was a big one that gained me a lot of like street cred, especially with IT, the ops engineers when they're trying to solve something like at 10 or 11 or even after midnight, I'd be jumping on the calls and I'm like, hey, I'm not the technical expert, but let me know what I can do to support you. I'll bring in the logistics, I'll bring in the business lines, I'll get them on the phone to help test. Whatever you need from me, I'm there. And instantly that was, transformational for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
it's one of those things that you don't really think about, like the value in what we do in our craft and our trade. We're bringing resources to a centralized place. So if you're thinking about like something's going on, something's broken, someone's fixing it, they're busy fixing it. They don't have time to go get the guy that needs to tell you that it's fixed or something. So you're bringing in the resources to support that element, and you just are a jack of all trades. You already know everyone to solve that problem, and you're bringing them the fuel that they need to put it.
Yeah, and that's another thing I did was incident management. So I worked with the incident commander for the bank, which whoever is on call. So I would be on call 2 weeks out of the month. I still am. I'm on call right now actually because the merger doesn't finish until June. But yeah, absolutely, Dan. So
It's an interesting kind of case. Tell us about the merger, man. Tell us about like your struggles with that, the uncertainties, where you felt you've been successful so far in that aspect.
so I just came on with Huntington Bank. They bought Cadence in November-ish. And then we had the holidays, we kind of found out everyone who was staying on prior to Christmas. Um, and so the first thing I thought, I didn't realize that I was going to have to do another interview. And so I did an interview with the one of the directors with enterprise risk. And it was an hour long, 45 minutes, an hour long. Went very well. I kind of just discussed what I did. Um, but as far as coming on from leading my own IT disaster recovery program and being in the middle of like building it to where I was kind of finally wanting it to be, um, we get bought out, and now uh, I'm on a team of 8, and I don't have as much say. I don't have as much impact on the program as I want to. Um, but I sometimes you go from a smaller bank, and now we're a top 10 bank with Huntington. Sometimes you gotta kind of you know go down a little bit to be successful in the future. I'd say that's another thing I learned in the military for sure. Um,
I
So you
think
said
one of the
you're,
things that I
oh,
observed,
go ahead.
one of the things I observed during your transition was like you didn't just sit there and wait for it. No one, everything you've talked about, you were out. We're trying to change your making sure that you were the right fit for everything. So it was a concentrated effort. Yeah, you said you were doing 8 hours a day, just job applying. So like you spent a considerable amount of effort to commit to BC and make that transition. And I remember your resume as well. Like your resume first, it was kind of generic, and then you went full out BC resume, and you were really killing it.
oh yeah, yeah, and I mean that's what you have. I mean, Dude, I mean, nothing good comes easy, right? And I wouldn't say, working 3 weeks. I was lucky, to be honest. They were my first offer, and then I took it on with Cadence. I signed the offer with them, and and then later on, I ended up getting two, three, four more offers. So I didn't wait as long, but I wanted to make sure that I had, a good position for myself lined up when I got out. So because I have a family and whatnot, so um, you know.
So what has the work-life balance been like since you've been in this role for, you mentioned you had a family.
Mhm. Um, so I'll start kind of from my extreme in life with my work-life balance. So I was a Cab Scout for 4 years. That work-life balance was basically non-existent with family. Um, and then went over to Intel, and a little bit better. Came over to banking, the banking industry, and it's absolutely phenomenal. I can take my kids to school. I can pick up my kids if I have to take them to a doctor's appointment. I can be involved in their sports games. Um, I can be more involved in their lives. So it's great. For us, we don't really have anybody monitoring our activity or anything. Being logged on. As long as you get your work done, I mean, everybody kind of treats you like an adult. So just get your stuff done, and as long as you are an adult, you won't get micromanaged. At least from my experience.
Oh, that's great.
I think I experienced that kind of same thing in the insurance industry, similar to banking. It's even as a contractor, they weren't tracking what I'm doing. They were, if you were delivering and you were a high performer, you've got a lot of leeway to be able to do what you need to do. I mean, sometimes I would just work 2 hours in the day, but if that 2 hours got everything that needed to be done, no
Yep.
one's asking me questions.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I miss being in the military, but I'm very happy with where I'm at, and it's also given me the position. Last year I was doing some other opportunities while I was at the bank as well, um, and it was just nice to be able to do that. And I am currently looking at probably starting opening my own emergency response company. We will see about that, but that's what I'm interested in right now.
So you're potentially pivoting into emergency management. Is that right?
Yeah, so along with Cadence, I was handling incidents. I was, doing ITDR stuff, disaster recovery exercises, backup testing, the planning for applications, um, and something else that we would have to manage. I would help BC out with often was, emergency response for hurricanes or tornadoes. Um, and so I actually, another thing that, transitioned over from the military is I had to sign for a bunch of equipment. And that's over out in Mississippi. But that involves like small generators, and we had some big branch generators as well. Chainsaws, and kind of community outreach stuff too, because they would like to do that during storms. I mean, we had a bit bags. Jesus, we had a bad storm 2 years ago, and Cadence Bank was out here doing a lot of community outreach with that. So um, yeah, I mean. Kind of navigating that, and we would have a contractor, and we'd have to kind of facilitate all of those moving parts. And then, when they're in the storm area, make sure there's an electrician to set up the generator, make sure there's gas, make sure, employees are taken care of. They have air or heat or whatever they need to survive. Or if they have to be displaced, how do we go about doing that as well? Um, so that was really interesting to learn. I enjoyed that aspect of it.
Tell them about your business that you're working on.
So I'm wanting to open up a emergency response company. Basically, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of like Agility, or they are large scale. And so basically, if in the event of a disaster, if something bad happens here locally in Augusta or anywhere else where we would have a footprint, then um, you pay a retainer fee every month, and whatever package that you're paying on the retainer fee every month, that's the equipment that you're basically promised to get if you lose power, or you know um, need anything like that, or if you need somebody to come clear out your driveway, or anything to help during a disaster, right? We can't do food because I'm not. That kind of gets into a different kind of thing, but um, yeah, that's kind of just the breakdown of what I'm looking at doing.
Sounds like your role's somewhat similar to mine, where I have a primary focus on operation resilience ITDR, but also manage crisis communications, all the natural disaster stuff. I always talk about what's critical isn't always sexy, but sometimes, when it comes to hurricanes and stuff, that's really my Super Bowl. That's like the exciting part of my job.
Right.
Life safety, crisis communications, keeping businesses, open when it comes to school closures, and talking about logistics of like, coordinating funding of, money through the Fed before a storm, and so on and so on. So that's the stuff that I really enjoy about my job.
It is exciting. Yeah, for sure. And you know, I will say it's nice going from Cadence, where I have so many hats over there. It is nice coming over to Huntington and just being more focused on, more directed work. And I'll have a different impact over here than I would have over there, but it's a positive change.
So knowing now what you experienced through transition, um, having worked at two different BC roles, two different companies, what's your advice to like the team out here in the audience for kind of being selective about things, or how you what should you be trying to achieve? Um, anything in that space you have to offer?
Yeah, so something that I've learned is, how's the culture at the place that you want to work at? Because you might not think that that matters, but I promise you it very much matters. Because once that shine wears off that new job penny, you're going to be looking at the culture of where you're at, and if you don't fit in or if you don't like it, you're going to be looking at other opportunities, and maybe you're stuck, or something worse happens. And that's my number one. I've been thinking about that a lot. Thankfully, I very much I'm from the South, and I like college football and Southern things. So, Cadence was a Southeastern bank, and you know, we had our we had offices in Birmingham and Houston and Mississippi, and I very much enjoyed that culture. And Huntington, they've got a little bit different of a culture, based out of Ohio, but it's still pleasant, and I like their culture as well. So.
What's the asset class size value evaluation for Huntington in the billions?
I it's I think it's 260 or
Put them on the
270.
spot.
Yeah, I think it's 260 or 270. So cadence was 40 to 60. I would always get different answers, and Google would
That's a
always give
huge
me different
shift
answers. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
because your
So
compliance level now, after 100 billion, now that
tier
changes
three.
everything. So can you
Yeah.
help us understand what the difference is between that small to a bigger bank looks like?
Yeah. So as far as audit purposes go, you know, you have like these different audit classes, right? I don't know a ton about audits. I wasn't super involved in it. I know enough to speak about it to be dangerous a little bit, but I thankfully that's one of the things I didn't have to handle, or any vendor reviews or anything. So, but coming from a smaller $60 billion bank with Cadence, audit is a lot less on you and less involved in everything that you're doing. Um, so I mean, almost everything that we did and I did had to be cleared through audit eventually, or checked or asked about. Um, and so my 2 months so far at Huntington, that's pretty much all they talk about is, and it's a lot more check the box stuff. At Cadence, I was trying to get away from that, and it's not always a bad thing because sometimes you have stuff that you have to check the box on and make sure it just gets done. You also want to make sure there's purpose in it, and you want to make sure it's done right. And I prefer not just checking the box, but it happens, and that's kind of how it is. But with audit, kind of you know more involved in your lives and work structure. There's a lot more check the box stuff for sure.
Yeah, sometimes you
and
got to
from
pick your battles based off the maturity of the program too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
and and based on the what I typically hear with smaller banks to larger banks is when you get to a larger bank, sometimes I've heard that you become more siloed. Is that true in your case?
1000%. So that's one thing I'm working with my director on right now is, hey, how can we resolve how siloed we currently are? That was the first thing I noticed when I came on my first week. And I'm working with a bunch of different lines of business and Huntington side with the merger, and kind of we're trying to figure out what apps we're going to retain, and all the information associated with that, the data center stuff. What are we doing with the data centers? There's a lot of moving parts with that, and you got to talk to a lot of people. And that made me kind of realize just how siloed it was. But you know, I I use the term compartmentalize of information just because being from the agency. But and I'm definitely not as involved with day to day talking with other areas around the bank. I'm really not. I'm more so focused just into my one space. Um, and I mean that's been my experience so far with it, and that's not always a bad thing. I get to be really good at the things that I currently do. So
Yeah, I hear a lot of different pros and cons about small banking versus large banking, and from some people who've mentored me earlier on, they said, it's not a bad thing to be in small banking because it allows you to understand holistically banking, at the foundational level, and then if you want to pivot later on and go into bigger banking, at least you have that understanding because to your point, it does get compartmentalized.
yeah,
um, and then you've already understood, all the components and the moving parts of organically how a bank works.
yeah, yeah, or you've been working on a project or an initiative, whatever you want to call it, for 2, 3, 4 months, and then you figure out that somebody else has also been doing that same exact thing, and they have a lot different data than you. But at least you get to collude with that. But yeah, so
And going back to your point about, having the org feel like a good fit, that I think that was huge. It resonated with me because I did my due diligence when I was looking through the company. When I started getting interviews and stuff like that and racking and stacking those, I got on LinkedIn and did my homework. I mean, I went into stalker mode and I'm like, okay, I want to understand how many people are here at this organization. What are their quarterly earnings? I want to understand like what's the higher tenure of employees. And what that told me was something very significant. And I'm not going to call out any other banks, but I'm going to tell you that I found one organization had a tenure of average 1 to 2 years, and
I
I
know
was like,
exactly which
wow.
one you're talking about.
I was like, wow, that tells me everything I need to know. Even though the paycheck was tremendous,
Yeah,
um, I mean, the pay was almost double, if not triple, of what the salary target I was looking for. But I was like, if people aren't happy within 1 or 2 years of this organization, I don't want to I don't want to chase the money over happiness and that work life balance. And so I looked at my organization and I saw higher tenure was 15, 20 plus years easy. for a lot of
Mhm.
employees. And I was like, they loved being here. So that really
Right.
resonated with me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna know, like, it's kind of like getting in a relationship, right? You're gonna know when it's the right fit, like you know it's the one. And I think doing
At
what you
least you
did,
hope
Jason,
so.
and I did a lot of I did a lot of the same, right? Um, it's it's actually gonna resonate well in the interview. You're gonna be more authentic if you're applying to something that you align with, and you have a good knowledge of what you're getting into, because they're not just looking for if you're the right fit. A lot of it is them looking if they're the right fit for you, because they want to make sure you're going to be there for that long tenure. They don't want to have to go and do that hiring process again right away.
Yeah. Yeah. That hiring process can be rough. I do want to harp on interviews a little bit. So, I mean, I know I did it a little bit earlier in the beginning. Just kind of be personable and be yourself, right? Um, so if you want to, if we're specifically talking about CBCP roles, make sure you know what an RTO is. I've done a lot of interviews. We were trying to bring on another employee for disaster recovery. And I've probably done 20 some odd interviews at that point of last year. Um, and just kind of make sure you know your terms, make sure you know you're competent. And if you need, like, put a cheat sheet up there, because sometimes you get nervous during an interview and you know what an RTO is, but then it's gone. And so, um, just kind of know your stuff, because you could have gotten that job if you remembered what an RTO is or an RPO, and make sure you can. So RPO is one that a lot of people, you know, uh, kind of don't ever understand or think that they do, and you can just explain it with one sentence as, you know, data loss measured by time, right? Um, and
I always I always tell them it's like writing a college paper. If you
yeah,
don't hit the save button for 4 hours, you might redo 4 hours of work. But if you don't hit the save button for 8, you might take an F on that paper. And that's how your database is
absolutely.
being looked at.
Oh yeah, yeah, and yeah, and another thing with interviews, and I would hope that everybody would know this, but you'd be surprised the amount of interviews that I've had where people have, trash behind them, or people have bad lighting, or their camera's like right here. Um, just be professional. Because if you were in the military, you are a professional. So, um, always maintain that. So,
Yeah, I see you're wearing a suit. I always say that that's my go-to if I'm wearing an interview. I was in suit and tie,
absolutely.
and the first day on the job, I wore a suit and tie to the office, and people are like, telling my
Hmm.
boss, they're like, you told him he didn't have to wear that, right? And I was like, hey, first
Oh yeah.
impressions. I was like, yeah, I might be laughed at right now, but like, because I mean, we were just coming out of COVID, right? And so all
Hmm.
these people like were showing up, like the whole HR policy on dress and appearance was just out the door. People are wearing sweats and stuff, and now we've dialed it back,
Oh
and
man.
people are now more business casual,
Yeah.
going back to that. But I mean, post or pre-COVID, everybody was wearing suits and ties and everything. I mean, it was like traditional banking,
Right.
but now it's like what does business casual look like now? It's like, hey, have a couple of like white collared shirts and a couple of blazers and some
Yeah.
khakis. I think you can't go wrong with that. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. And that's another thing. That's a great point. Is like your bodily appearance for sure. Iron your shirt. You know. uh, Yeah, I mean, you can have the best interview in the world, but if you have that one guy that's interviewing you and he doesn't like the way you look, there
If
you
anyone
go.
watches
But
Seinfeld, it's kind of like, the Seinfeld thing where you just can't stop looking at that one thing that's wrong.
there, yeah,
So like,
yeah,
if you're coming to the interview and something's off, like your lighting's off, your camera's at a weird angle or something, you're not like,
yeah,
you didn't prep for that and make yourself look like the best you.
yeah,
It's putting you behind on like the likability factor, which is a major factor, because if I'm gonna work with this guy every day for however long I'm gonna be at the company, I want to make sure that guy's a cool dude and I'm not always like looking at this weird camera angle or something that's bothering me. It's like you're giving him the ick. So don't give him the
a-
ick. Make sure you've got all the things.
absolutely. My only 4 years in combat arms, but I have that demeanor of, it almost makes me want to say, like, dude, don't be a freaking private. Like, just be a professional, and know your stuff. But uh, I'm not going to go
Well,
down the stories of the things that I've seen
like you
on
were,
interviews, but
well, like you were saying, like all your interviews were all them just asking you great questions, like about yourself
right.
or personality things, because
Yep.
you had already showed them on your resume that you had the BC knowledge. They didn't need to test you so much on your ability for that role level. So that likability was probably the main factor that got you in the spot. You'd already
Absolutely.
qualified for it.
1000%. So,
And when you talk about like optics, from interview presence and everything, today you can see that I have my home office background, which is actual. But if I was going into an interview, that would never be there. I would have a virtual background showing me an office environment, and they know that it's a virtual environment, but
right.
it basically tunes out everything else except for me. It like
Mhm.
focuses on me, and what I can control is wearing that suit and tie, and having that office background. It's like they're not distracted by, oh, what books does he have on his shelf or whatever. And
Oh
it's like
yeah,
if you don't have a virtual background, in all doubt, just blur your background, and either or.
absolutely. Yeah. And then the other thing, the last thing that I have to say just with interviews is, don't go into the interview and take it over. Um, don't go in there and, talk about the like tool that you built on put on GitHub. Like, don't talk about that stuff. I mean, unless they ask and it's a part of your job and your resume, but you know, uh or pull up a PowerPoint and show them all of your accomplishments throughout your entire life. That's nothing to do with the job. You know, it's just, you'd think it's common sense, but
No, that's
um
an excellent point. I feel like from that strategy, it's like speaking to auditors, right? Give them what they
right.
ask for. Don't give them
Yeah, give them what
anything
they ask
else.
for. Yeah, absolutely. So
Maybe occasionally sprinkle something good on there, but just keep it at a minimum.
yeah. Or talk about how bad their tool is. Don't do that either. The
Oh
tool
no.
that they use. Yeah.
Oh, you're using that company? I heard it's garbage.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah.
Debbie Downer.
Oh man.
Wesley says he's having some trouble getting past the HR screenings. As soon as they find he's out of state, seems to scare him off. Any advice there?
Um, if it's not asterisked and it's not mandatory that you put your state, don't. Um, if there's a way that, I mean, if it's an on-site job, you're gonna have to move out there. And if there's a way that you could, possibly, just, I can't tell you to lie or anything, so I'm not gonna say that, but do with that as you will.
There, there, there's been a major push to kind of return to office.
There
I
has
think a
been.
lot of companies are fatiguing on the remote work aspect. They want to get back to connecting with people and some of those things. So it's pretty rare to find a remote job, and when you do, it's usually a little bit lower pay these days. But they're still out there. BC opportunities they're just opening when they're opening. So you got to be full prep, ready to go. Um, Honestly, if somebody's telling you that you got to be in the state and that's not a place you want to be, you shouldn't be chasing the jobs that that aren't a good fit for you.
Yep.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
the other piece I would say too is everything is for negotiation, right? So if you see something that they say on site, yeah, you should probably treat it as on site. But at the same time, it's like you don't give them all of everything that they're looking for up front. It's like, hey, have that
Hmm.
negotiation, have that interview first, and then explain your situation after you might be on your second or third interview. Like, hey, I really like this company. I think it's a good fit. I think you guys like me. I would like to negotiate maybe a hybrid schedule if you're open to it, or talking about stuff like that. The big thing that I see though is the biggest wild card that everybody has in their back pocket is when you're in your military transition time, if you have that move, let them know that it's at no cost to them to move you. And that is super attractive to a lot of companies because that also gets factored in the compensation package.
Sure.
And Keith's the master of like the negotiation phase there. The key thing he mentioned there, he didn't bring it up at HR. It was like interview 2. They already, like, he's on interview 2. He's probably already the prime candidate. They really want him bad. And now they're going to be like, well, I don't want to go back and re-interview all those people that I didn't think about. So let's commit to this guy. I mean, we can work around it. Because the hiring team, they're easy to work with. HR is trying to get that exact fit for the bill. They don't want to get in hot water with their boss for approving before they got to the hiring manager approving. So wait till it gets later on down the road if you want to try to negotiate that avenue. Even if it does say
agree with
in
that.
person. Like I work from Atlanta.
It's like
I work from Atlanta, but the so yeah, I work from Atlanta, but like the HR put this role as a hybrid. They changed it on me from remote to hybrid. But when I got to the hiring team, they were like, yeah, I know that's cool. We understand you're far away. We only need you to come in every once in a while. And that's what happens.
Yeah, and I think like with the interview process, it's like dating, right? It's like don't tell them you have kids until like the third date, right?
Absolutely. Can relate. So I'm interested in moving to BC, currently in first line of defense compliance role. Oh, I mean, are we still on? Or did I?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
still on.
Everything went quiet real quick. So I don't know about, I mean, if you're in a compliance role, you might want to look at doing like a third party risk job or something like that. Um, but so as far as like relating everything over from uh the military over into BC or whatever, or DR or whatever, um, you know, just kind of go back and think about a lot of the things that you did in whether that's managing a team or managing, you know, response. If you're in a combat role, like how did you respond to certain things? Did you take leadership courses? Did you take with incident response as far as I'm thinking, like how did you respond to things? How did you manage, you know, things went bad. Now how do I get everyone together to fix it? And then also contingency planning, right? I mean, that's what a lot of BC plans kind of are, right? Is like, how do I write a contingency plan to or figure out like what happens if shit goes south, basically. Um, and a lot of us have already done that, and that's why BC is just such a good fit for the military. If I hope that helped. If not, I mean, Dan, do you have anything else you could put in there for that?
I would just hinge on that first line of defense. BC is a tactical element of BC is in first line of defense. So your BIAs, the analysis work that you're doing to get to the planning phase is that first line of defense.
Yeah, really rolls up in the second line of defense when you're just being the quarterback and allowing people to exercise their strategy. When the rubber hits the pavement, that's first line of defense. So the actual people who are carrying out the incident response are the ones that are in that first LOD. The other big thing I'll say is the last item. I'll say that when you're looking at the scope that you had in the military, like you oversaw like 150 people, right? Like in your role in the military. Well, things change a lot in corporate. You're probably not going to be overseeing 150 people. What they care about is how many directs did you report on? Okay, in the last 10 years in the military, I had an average of 4 to 7 people that I wrote on an annual basis. That's what they care about. That's the scope. So if you're into that manager role, they want to understand how many directs can you report on it that you feel comfortable with. They don't care about what was your scope, like, oh, I had a $3.5 billion budget and I had 150 to 250 people under me. They want to know about those directs.
You know, in that same space, you're never going to find a BC role where you're leading more than like 10, 15 people. If you are, you're like at the top of the pinnacle, right? If you're leading that much. So
Bamel.
you're leading what you should be leading in any BC role is a lot of processes, a lot of functions.
Yep.
That you should be leading the BC process in those functions. So you're a manager of business continuity. You're cross-functionally leading those functions and process owners in doing the business continuity process. So that's what you want to put numbers, not in the people you led, but the numbers in the processes that you led.
Agreed.
Well, we're right up at cap for time there, you know. But I think, Jacob, if you're good with it, you know, toss your LinkedIn in the chat, and you know, people connect with you, and if they have some questions about banking or whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me grab that.
And Jacob's a texter too, so he's a big texter.
I am a texter.
So if he doesn't hit you on an email,
I can
this
drop
has been
my
a great session. Thanks for coming to speak, Jacob.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you guys very much for having me on. It was a pleasure. You know, the more I get to speak tradecraft, the better. Sometimes I go a little while without doing it and I lose it.
all right, yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you again, Jacob, for coming out and speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, see y'all.
All right, take care.
See y'all later.